Hey everyone, welcome to this webinar. This is called Did You Know Routing Automation is Your Productivity Breakthrough? And we'll be covering the routing capabilities within Xpedition PCB. Just a quick what you will learn today, how to utilize some of Xpedition's routing automations and interactive routing techniques to complete your complex designs or just designs in general, just a lot quicker with high quality routing. How to use the sketch router effectively. Not sure if anyone here is currently using the sketch router or even using Xpedition PCB, but the sketch router is a very powerful technology that allows you to quickly and high quality results with the sketch router. Also, I'll be talking just about some advanced tuning techniques that we have capabilities within Xpedition and how the sketch router is fast and matches manual routing. Before we hop into the technical details, I just want to talk a little bit about Oasis Sales. Oasis Sales has been a Mentor Graphics partner for over 16 years. If you're unfamiliar, Mentor Graphics has now been purchased by Siemens, and that acquisition has happened in the last year or so. And we are happy to say that we will be continuing being a partner with Mentor Siemens. Oasis Sales covers essentially the Midwest and Northwest of the United States. So if you're in that territory, great, welcome. If you're not in that territory, thank you for coming as well. You might be familiar with TriLogic, who is kind of our counterpart in the East Coast. And then if anyone's down in the California region, that is EDA Direct as well. So we do host quite a few webinars, and if you like what you see today and want to learn a little bit more about any of our products that we offer, please head over to our website, oasissales.com, where we have all of our archived webinars and links to them to our YouTube page. So just want to throw this out there. The next webinar that I will be doing is going to be February 15th, and that is going to cover advanced technology, Hyperlinks PI for AC analysis. Hyperlinks PI is power integrity tool for AC analysis, just to make sure your power planes are going to be effective at all frequency ranges and make sure that it's a nice quiet power plane. So that's going to be happening at the same time, just in a few weeks. Also, here's our YouTube channel. Like I said, all of our archived webinars that we've done in the past, you can find those on our YouTube channel. It might just be easiest just to go to oasissales.com, and then you'll find a link to there as well. Here's my contact information. Again, my name is Kyle Lake. I'm an application engineer with Oasis Sales, and I cover all of the board system division tools that Mentor Graphics offers, including Xpedition, PADS Professional, and Hyperlinks for your signal integrity and simulation needs. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into the featured webinar today. Again, it's titled, Did You Know Routing Automation is Your Productivity Breakthrough? So just a small background on the Mentor Graphics solutions for PCB design. Today we'll be talking about Xpedition. It is Mentor's flagship enterprise PCB design tool. Offers incredible horsepower for your layout as well as your schematic design, and then offers some very advanced data management capabilities as well as team design capabilities. On the smaller end of things is PADS. PADS has been around for quite a long time, if you have not heard of it. It is more of a desktop-based solution for your PCB design, really suited well for smaller design teams that are still tackling advanced technologies. It can offer quite a lot of power, enabling you to get your most complex designs done, but it just doesn't have those wraparounds for data management or collaboration as much as Xpedition has. Hyperlinks is a very well-known tool in the simulation space. It can cover anything from SPICE simulation to signal integrity, power integrity, has some built-in EMI checks for your DRC needs and sign-off. So Hyperlinks is what I'll be covering in just a few weeks, again, for that PI AC analysis. And then on the manufacturing side of things, Valor is another very popular tool to check for assembly checks as well as fabrication checks for your printed circuit board design. This slide just kind of highlights how the recent trend in the last couple of decades for PCB design has been going. The main line that you want to take note of is that red line that's almost exponentially increasing, and that is the average leads per square inch on printed circuit boards. Everything is getting smaller, components have more pins, have more functionality, and again getting into a smaller package because we're trying to cram as much technology as we can in ever decreasing enclosures, space, as well as just printed circuit board design space. So we don't see this trend ending anytime soon. So that's why we do have to have advanced routing capabilities in order to route your design completely and in very high quality. And the board on the left is actually one of our technology award winners through Mentor Graphics. Just highlight some of the advanced technology that some of our customers are using and how they are using our tools to complete those designs effectively. All right, so hopping into Xpedition, I'm going to just give a general overview of what we're going to talk about and what we're going to demo at the end after these slides. I'll make these slides brief. If you're unfamiliar with Xpedition, there has been a lot of user interface enhancements in the last couple of releases. So the things that I'm going to be talking about today are the Net Explorer, which allows us to see every single different net in the design, whether it has been routed or not, where it's located. Everything's cross-probable in here and allows us to give us a lot of control over every net in the design, seeing which nets we want to route first, look at our different constraint classes, look at our different differential pairs, or any just groups of net that you want to define very quickly that allows us to do that and make those changes on the fly. The display control is a very important feature within Xpedition. It allows you to essentially turn on and off different design objects, also affects the selectability of every different design object. So I'll be talking a little bit about that. It's very important to understand how that works and how to use it correctly in order to get your design done. And then tooltip videos, those are small little icons. If you just hover over any of those icons in your design, it's going to go ahead and start playing a small video that shows you how to use that icon so you don't have to delve down into the help files, for example. Okay, so what we're going to be really talking about today is just the routing capabilities within Xpedition. So we'll talk a little bit about interactive routing, which is probably what most people use today to route almost every single trace in their design. So interactive routing is a very easy way to route your traces. It minimizes clicks or mouse clicks as much as possible, and it allows us to do a correct by construction design methodology, meaning that if you have all of your design constraints set up correctly, your pin pairs set up correctly through the schematic, it allows us to very quickly and easily route the design. And once you have it done, you can be very confident that it's done correctly and following all your design guidelines. While we are interactive routing, we get a lot of visual feedback that allows us to essentially see and verify that every requirement is being met while you are routing your design. For example, you'll see on that screenshot on the right-hand side, there is one trace that's being routed after this entire other bus has been routed. So you'll see that it's being highlighted as we're actually pulling that trace through those other already routed traces. And it allows us, it gives us visual feedback to know that if that is even possible to route between those selected traces. Okay. What we can also do while we are interactive routing is have multiple views of the PCB design. So you can have the beginning where you're actually starting the routing, and you can have the end pin pair, which shows you where we are trying to actually complete that trace. Okay, so a very big enhancement that has happened just a few releases ago is the sketch router. And the sketch router really delivers a lot of power and accessibility to all of the PCB designers that use it. It allows us to manage all the locations of traces and select which traces we want to route with the sketch router. If you've never seen the sketch router, what it really does is it allows you to grab a group of nets, essentially, and draw a sketch path for those group of nets. And as that sketch path is completed, you can just hit sketch route and it will follow, those traces will be routed and follow that sketch path that you drew on your design. So it's very quick, it maintains high quality, and allows you to do what-if scenarios, essentially. Say, what if I want to route around this component, or what if I want to route through this component or on a different layer? It's very quick, easy to set up and use, and gives very high results. So I will definitely be demoing this. Okay. If any of you are doing a lot of differential pairs, Xpedition has a lot of power that makes this a very simple process to do. Through the use of the constraint manager and setting up design constraints, we can very easily set the differential spacing and obviously the trace widths that we're using. And while we're doing interactive routing or actually using the sketch router on our differential pairs, you can see that tuning meter in the slide here on the right-hand side. So it will maintain symmetrical pad entry, which can be very important. Length and phase matching, if you need to do any phase matching, or if you're trying to meet length requirements, we can easily tune our differential pair in an accordion fashion and tune both of the traces at the same time. So like I said, the sketch routing solutions for the diff pairs, it's very easy to do. We can just draw that sketch and have that differential pair routed, and then we can do interactive push and shove after the traces have been routed. Okay, and then one of the last things I'm going to be talking about is just the DRC visualization that we have on our different traces. So a lot of people do like to route designs with DRC turned off occasionally. That can be useful for different cases if you're trying to break out of a BGA, for example, or route through a very fine pitch area. But once you do turn that off, you can definitely run into issues. So we have the ability to do some DRC visualization, which will provide feedback, visual feedback in real time, showing on the right-hand side that it just shows those traces in those kind of highlighted areas are too close to those component pads, and we definitely need to take a closer look at that. So at the end of the design, we can either run a batch DRC, and we will see all of these violations in a text-based format, or we can have the real-time DRC visualization that gives us visual feedback and shows us exactly where we are having those DRC violations. Okay. And then once you actually see those, it's actually very easy to click on the trace that is having that violation and just repair it, essentially pushing the trace back to a correct clearance value. Okay, well with that, I didn't want to bore you to death with too many slides, so we're going to go ahead and hop into Xpedition and see the demo. And I'm just going to make sure that there's no questions currently. Excellent. If you guys do have any questions, please feel free to answer those or ask those in the questions box, and I will get to those accordingly. Okay, so this is Xpedition PCB, and if you're not familiar, I'll just go very quickly through some of the icons and the display control that I talked about. So the first thing I do want to talk about is, again, those extended tooltips. There is a lot of icons that we can have in Xpedition if you have a lot of toolbars open, and that can get a little bit overwhelming. So if you would like to understand how to use an icon, I can just hover my mouse over multiple hug traces, for example, and just after a couple of seconds, it's going to start playing a little video that shows us exactly how to use this feature. It also gives you those step-by-step directions and then the video, so hopefully this will eliminate the need to hop into any help files or try and understand it and figure it out by yourself. So this is just, again, Xpedition is always trying to increase productivity through making it just a little bit easier to use for the end user. Okay, so routing definitely can be an important task, probably the most important task next to component placement in the PCB design. So here I have the Net Explorer on the left-hand side of my screen currently. And what this shows, again, is all of the nets in the design that we need to route. Okay, so what we can do here is it's totally cross-probable. It allows us to select a trace, and it will automatically highlight and zoom into if you would like. Or we can just have it highlight the design as well. I can select multiple trace or multiple net lines, and it will highlight them all in my design currently, just allowing us to understand where all of our different nets currently are. What we can also do is take a look at our differential pairs. So for example, I just select differential pair, and it highlights all of our different differential pairs in the current design. We can also select our different constraint classes, VSync and clock match. So everything in here, very easy to quickly visualize where it's located in the design. Okay. So we also have a feature called marking nets, which we use in conjunction with the Net Explorer. And if I have the correct settings turned on, it will allow me to quickly select which nets I want to mark. So for example, if I select these nets here and just very quickly mark those, it's only going to show me the nets that I have marked in my design. So this can make it very quick and easy to understand where those net lines that I want to work on are and eliminate all of my extraneous design data that I'm not very concerned about. So for example, if I unmark all of my nets that I have currently marked, we'll see all those net lines again. And if I want to, for example, mark all of my differential pairs, I can just select differential pairs, mark all of those, and now we're only seeing the differential pairs in my design. So very quick, very easy way to eliminate extraneous design data that we're not concerned about right now. Can be very easy to mark your critical nets that you're concerned about and then go ahead and start routing those. So I'm going to just quickly be checking questions. So if you do have any questions, feel free to ask those in the Q&A box, and I will address those as, if it's relevant, I can address that at the time, or we can wait until a Q&A session at the end. Okay, so that is marking nets, which can be a very effective technique in creating an easy to route environment. What I can also do, so this is the Net Explorer, and very similar to the Net Explorer is the Component Explorer in Xpedition PCB. So again, this shows, just like the Net Explorer showed all the nets in my design, now I have the Component Explorer, which shows all the different components in my design. Okay. So again, it will select and highlight all of the components that I have in my different component groups. And this can be useful for if you know that you want to route your DDR3 interface for a certain reason first. You can quickly understand that component, highlight it, and then just like we marked nets, I can mark a particular component. For example, I'll mark U11 here. And if I again have the correct settings turned on, so now that I've marked that component, if I say from mark component, select this icon here, now it's only going to show the net lines that are coming from that component. So it can be a very powerful way to first mark nets and then mark components in order to see exactly the net lines that we want to start working with. Okay. So a little bit about the display control. I have been playing around with it a little bit as well. This is very important to talk about as well, even with routing capabilities, because what the display control allows us to do is select color visibility on a layer by layer basis and select or set selection filters as well as visibility filters. So in the bottom tab here, we have the global view and interactive selection. So you'll see we have all of our different design objects listed. and we have a visibility checkbox on each of those line items, as well as a selectability checkbox on each of those line items. So for whatever reason, if you're working within Xpedition and you can't select something or you can't see something, you can just come down here, and if I really quickly want to turn off net lines, for example, I can just select that, and now we're only looking at our components. Okay. You can also define schemes within here. So you'll see on this drop down here, I have a routing scheme currently enabled. But if I, for example, want to go to a placement scheme, I can very quickly turn on the placement scheme, and you'll see that it automatically adjusts the selection filter as what is visible on other designs. So those schemes can be saved on disk or on a network location and shared amongst your peers in order for you to really get the most out of Xpedition layout. So layer 1, for example, will turn off all of our different layers that we have defined, and you can see that in our layer display, all of the layers are turned off except layer 1. All right, so I'm going to go back into the routing scheme, because that is what we are talking about today. And you'll see it automatically defines our planes in here. I'm going to go ahead and turn layer 3 and 4 off. Those are our planes currently. Okay, so just for some differential pair routing, I'm going to go ahead and work on U5 and U4 up here in this design. So the next thing I want to talk about routing is our function keys down at the bottom. So you'll see these function keys in Xpedition are all context sensitive. So very important to understand that, because it allows us to really select anything in the design and start doing anything in the design as well. So you'll see as soon as I select that component pin, for example, F2 goes from move to a fan out. So if I want to, I can just hit F2, and it's going to go ahead and fan out just that particular component pin. Okay? So that's just some of the options that you have, and it's all context sensitive. So whatever you have selected, the function keys on the bottom hand side of the screen will update and kind of let you know what's possible with what you are currently working with and what you can do. So for example, I'm going to hit the F3 key, or the plow/multi. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow me to start plowing these traces off of these pins. So you'll see this is a differential pair that's been defined, and as soon as I begin dragging one of the traces off that component pin, just like most differential pair routing techniques out there today, it's going to go ahead and bring us all of the differential pair. So you'll see we do have a length requirement that we have defined on this particular trace, and you can see that the tuning meter actually updates in real time. So it looks like the length requirement on this particular differential pair is 4,000 thousandths to 5,000. So it doesn't look like we're actually going to get there without some extreme meandering. So another thing I want to highlight, you can kind of see a circle around my cursor, a small bubble around the traces. So you'll see once I move close to component pads, for example, kind of a blue highlight is around those component pads. This is a DRC clearance that we have defined for pinned trace. So that means that we cannot get any closer to those component pads than is defined in those highlights. Okay, so this is a DRC visualization technique that allows us to really understand how close, and even if we're going to be able to get through any component pad. So if we wanted to try and get through these component pads down, you can kind of see from that bubble that that's not going to be possible with our current trace width or our design constraints. Okay. So what I can do here is I'm just going to quickly end this trace, and as soon as I get close to the component pads, it's going to go ahead and finish it for me. Or I can actually hit F5, the function key, auto finish, and it's going to help me finish that for me. Okay, so if we took note of the tuning meter, it does not look like I actually met our length requirements. So we're going to go ahead and have to do some tuning on this design. And Xpedition allows us to do auto tuning. So what I can do here is just select that differential pair, and you'll see again on the function key, I've got an F4 for tune. And if I go ahead and click that, it's going to go ahead and insert a serpentine for me. Okay, so the system will do it as much as possible. It looks like we've got some phase tuning as well as some sawtooth tuning on the beginning and end of that trace just to make sure it's matched up correctly. What I can also do after it's actually inserted the tune for us, a really powerful capability within Xpedition is I can select the accordion itself. So this allows me to actually move the accordion around if I need to, and you'll see once I get close to these component pads, it's actually going to adjust the height of the accordion itself. Okay, so it's automatically updating itself and allows us to see what's going to work best for our design. What I can also do is actually increase the amplitude and then also decrease the width of that accordion just to make sure we're getting it as exactly as we need it. Okay, so this is a really extremely easy way to tune and then also adjust your accordions after you've tuned your traces. If I want to go ahead and get rid of that accordion, again, I can just select the box here and just hit delete. What I can also do is just do a manual tune. So this is that was an auto tune functionality. I can also just hit a manual tune and it's going to insert just a small little box for us and allow me to adjust it as I see fit, just to meet our length requirements. So once we're good there, we should be good to go, and I'll leave that trace just like that. So now once we've got one differential pair already routed, I can go ahead and begin routing another differential pair. So again, that DRC bubble is highlighting the component pads clearance that we need, as well as the trace clearance that we see against those other traces on that differential pair that we just routed. So Xpedition does have real-time push and shove. So you'll see if I want to push this trace, for example, it's very simple to do and quickly push it out of the way. Again, all adhering to our DRC guidelines and allows us to quickly push and shove. So push and shove, very powerful with an Xpedition. It allows us to do push and shove in multiple buses and push as many traces around as we need to. Okay, so that's some pretty easy differential pair routing. All right, I'm going to quickly check for questions. So I see Lonnie says, is there an auto place? No, unfortunately there's no auto place within Xpedition. I wasn't going to cover placement too much within this webinar, but I have covered that in the past where using the Component Explorer, pretty easy to set up component groups and place those one at a time. All right, so now moving on to a little bit more auto routing, we'll use the sketch router to quickly route this bus here. So what I'm going to do again is I'm going to select those net lines. I'm going to right click and hit mark. And again, just like we had using the Net Explorer, I can just select the net lines I want to mark in the design and only show those. Okay. So what I can do here now is I can do some sketch routing on this. So again, you'll see on the function key, draw sketch point or draw sketch path. And what I can do here is select the layer, and you'll see that this little cursor is beginning to follow my icon here. So this is our sketch path that we're drawing, and it allows me to very quickly define how these paths or how these traces are going to be routed. So this is kind of a hockey stick method. If you prefer a freehand method, I can actually hit the F10 function key that says toggle draw style, and it's going to actually be more of a freehand. So it's more of a paint where you're actually painting the sketch path. And if you don't like what you're currently looking at, you can just kind of go back up against it, and it will eliminate that. So this is my sketch path. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit the layer 1 key just to switch back to layer 1. So you'll see that the sketch path actually has adjusted and allowed me to, it shows the color, shows me back on layer 1, signifying that blue. All right, so what this has done is created a sketch plan for us. Sketch plans are a new feature that was just released a couple of releases ago, VX.2. And what this sketch plan allows us to do is it actually start planning out our sketch paths before we create them. So what this is showing is kind of the width of all of our net lines that we currently have defined. And after we've drawn the sketch plan, we can actually go ahead and adjust what it looks like. Okay, so this can be saved with the design, and then we can actually route it later. So once we have our sketch plan defined, I can go ahead, right-click, and just route sketch. And you'll see that the tool has now auto-routed all of those traces for us. Okay, so very easy and quickly we can set up those sketch plans, save them on our design, and then possibly route them at a later time. So it does a very high quality. What the sketch router really tries to do is go for quality over quantity finished. So we have some different clearance here defined on some of these traces, but as you can see, once we have actually routed those traces, very easy to do some simple push and shove on this entire bus. Okay. And again, you'll see we've got that DRC visualization that's showing us where we can, how close we can get to those other traces. Okay. So also within Xpedition, we have the ability to define rule areas. And you'll see here that over this kind of orange line, you can see that the traces are necking down automatically. So this can be very useful to define for your fine pitch BGAs. I've created this rule area here that shows it's a rule area on all of our different layers. So you can see that the trace width is going down from 6 mils, shows down here on the bottom of the screen, the trace width of 6 mils before getting into that rule area. Now, once it automatically necks down, you can see that it necks down to a trace width of 4 mils. Okay. So if you'd like more information on rule areas, we can talk about that a little bit later, and it's very well documented in the documentation as well. Pretty easy to set up, and yet a very powerful feature within Xpedition. Okay. Okay, so also with the sketch router, we can very quickly define where we want traces to go without even selecting the net lines. So you'll see that we kind of have a memory bank here between U28, U18, and U14. I can just select which layer I want to route on and start drawing this sketch, for example. And you'll see that as soon as the tool understands where that sketch path is going, it highlights those net lines for us. So if I just double click, it's going to go ahead and route this memory line for us. And again, once it's been routed, I can go ahead and push and shove those traces to all be symmetrical and look similar. Okay, so sketch router, again, you can very quickly run it once or with all of those net lines selected, or you can go on just a net line basis, and you'll see that it automatically selects the traces for us to use and routes those correctly for us. So I can select a different layer as well and go ahead and draw the sketch. And it will automatically insert vias for us as well as complete the trace. So the sketch router has multiple uses. You can quickly and easily do buses like this and show them meandering around, or you can very quickly do a more spread out pattern using the ability to have the tool select which net lines to route and then have it do it very effectively. So what I'm going to do here is going to just quickly show you how well the sketch router actually follows the actual sketch path that I draw. So I'm going to go ahead and only work on these nets again. And for example, if I want to draw a sketch and just do a what-if scenario, I can actually see how well the sketch path is going to work. So you'll see that I can very quickly say, hey, what if I need to route these traces in this very meandering way? You can very quickly do that, and you can see how well the sketch router actually takes into consideration the sketch path that you just drew. Okay, so if you don't like that particular thing, I can just do a Control-Z for undo. And the sketch router actually has two different ways to route. What I'm routing in currently is packed mode, which what it does is it tries and routes those traces as close as possible to the sketch path that you've drawn. Or I can route it in the unpacked mode, which kind of makes it a little less packed together. So if I switch it to unpacked and just reuse that last sketch, I'll go ahead and just draw this one more time. Again, with that unpacked methodology, we can see now that it's unpacked, it doesn't really pack them as close together. This can be more useful in just components that have a lot of connections between them, and you don't necessarily need all of those traces to be as close as they possibly can. All right, so one of the last things I'm just going to really quickly highlight is the ability to do that DRC visualization that I was talking about a little bit earlier. So, for example, if I'm going to go ahead and route some of these as well with the sketch router real quick. And turn off the net lines just to make sure we can actually see what we're looking at. So in order to understand what we're actually looking at in this design and make sure that our traces are adhering to DRC or our design constraints, you have the ability to route without DRC on. So that can be useful for sometimes if you're trying to break out and you're really comfortable with understanding what's doable in your design. But for example, if I forget to go ahead and turn it back on and do a DRC check, we can actually see that if I get a little bit too close to these component pads or to other traces, we will be highlighting those in our DRC visualization. Okay, so this is a very easy way to see what traces are out of our design specs according to our design guidelines. And if I wanted to fix that, for example, very quickly, what I can do is just go ahead and right-click on that trace and repair selected. Actually, I've got to select the entire net, and I'm going to go ahead and hit repair. So you'll see once I repair that trace, the tool essentially just moves it out of that DRC violation. Okay? So very quickly and easily can I go ahead and fix anything that's not adhering to our DRC rules. All right. All right, so with that, I think I don't see any other questions currently, but if you guys do have any questions in the future, I will put up my contact information here, and please feel free to reach out to me on email or via phone. I'm definitely more than happy to answer any questions or help out with any technical issues that you may be having. All right, so thanks again for attending. I hope you found something useful and learned a little bit more about the tool. Again, here's my contact information. My name is Kyle Lake. I'm an application engineer for Xpedition, PADS Professional, as well as Hyperlinks. So feel free to reach out to me if you have questions regarding any of those tools. All right, thank you again for attending, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.